Welcome. Today we have an honor to have with us Dr. Alan Blotcky, who is a forensic and clinical psychologist who is also, he has his own private practice in Alabama and also an associate professor at the Department of Psychology at University of Alabama. Thank you so much, Dr. Blotcky, for being here today.
Thank you.
I was so fascinated to listen to your talk in Athens about your research, your latest research in the motivation of alienation. And that was kind of a really interesting conversation, I thought, because motivation is something that's really difficult to measure, right? It's very
Right.
difficult to determine. And it's not something that you kind of can go to court and oh, this is why he does something, right? Or she does something. Yeah, let's talk about that. Like, what made you wanted to do a research in motivation?
It's a good question. And what's good about parental alienation right now is that we've defined it in many ways on behavioral terms. The behavior of the alienating parent, the behavior of the rejected parent, and the behavior of the alienated child. And I think that's really important that we've done that because, as you say, in court, judges and attorneys and mediators and parent coordinators, they can understand behavior because it's something you can see and touch and feel and hear. And so to define it on behavioral terms is really important, and I'm glad that that's what's happened over the years. But if we step back from that, one of the questions judges will often turn to me and say is, okay, I understand the behaviors that you're talking about, but why is dad doing this? Or why is mom doing this? And sometimes the answer to that is, I don't know, because motivation is something that is sort of in your head and in your heart. And it's not something that you can easily touch or hear or smell or feel because it's private. And so we often don't know the exact motivation of an alienating parent because, and the other thing we know is that alienating parents are not very forthcoming. They're secretive, they're deceitful, they're conniving, and they don't openly tell you why they're doing what they're doing. And so motivation is something that is hard to measure, as you mentioned in your question, but it's still something that I wonder about, and I think we should all wonder about, because in any given case, there's always a question about why is this going on? We can describe what's going on, we can diagnose what's going on, but why is it going on? And the why really gets to the motivation. And so that's why my interest in it. And my interest in it is also because I've done so many of these cases now. Motivations can really, really vary. They can vary from vindictiveness to fear to selfishness, the whole gamut of motivations can be present in any given case. But I think it's important to figure out what the motivation is, because sometimes it's the motivation that you can address in treatment, which will then translate into behavioral change. And vice versa is true sometimes too, where you can change the behavior, and by doing so, that will eventually change the motivation. So I just think motivation is a fascinating area in the area. It is hard to measure it. It is hard to research it. But I wanted to give it a trial effort to see if I could pick out some of the motivational beliefs that seem to be operative in these cases.
Thank you. And before Dr. Blotcky shared the findings of his research, I'm curious for the audience that are watching, for your personal cases, I'm curious, what do you see, what do you think is the motivation behind the alienators campaigns of alienation? I'm curious to hear. And also, if you guys could please let us know if the audio is okay, if you can actually hear us, and where you are calling in from as well. I'm curious to hear because Dr. Blotcky is from Alabama. I'm right now is in California. And we all have different, like in our personal cases, I think we all have different, I guess, imagination or thoughts about what the reason why the alienator is doing this thing to us. Either we are the children or with the adult. Thank you so much, Nidhi. Hi, Maura. Thank you so much. Jane said that is there our childhood trauma and fear of abandonment? Yeah, I think that's a good one. That's a very good one, I think.
Yeah, fear is a common one. And sometimes we think that alienating parents are all just vindictive and that's all there is to it. What my research showed, and I think what we know through our own experiences, is that fear can be a major motivational impetus in these kinds of cases.
Thank you. And Jennifer's from Dallas. We got Ryan from Wisconsin. And Ryan thinks that it's money. That's an interesting one too. And we actually kind of do see a bit of that. But sometimes it's money, sometimes it's not money. There are cases where alienators simply take the child and take off, and you never see them again, and there's no money involved. So some cases it is about money because it's to do with child support and that kind of things. We got Connie's from Texas. So we do have people from all over the places. So let's talk about how did you do this research, like the method of this?
Well, the method of it was pretty simple. And again, I want to emphasize it's the very beginning stages. What I did is I went back and looked at 40 different cases of parental alienation where the alienating parent, either through a custody evaluation or a psychological evaluation, had been interviewed and had provided information, had provided content. And so I went back and looked at those interviews and looked for verbatim written statements from a parent. And then I went back and I got them rated as to which one of these comments were positive, neutral, or negative. Negative would be something negative about the other parent. Something positive obviously would be something positive toward the other parent, and neutral would be sort of inconclusive or undetermined. So all the positive ones and inconclusive ones were thrown out. And I only looked at the negative verbatim comments that one parent made toward the other parent. And again, all of these 40 parents had been diagnosed as being alienating parents. And so I ended up with a total of 82 verbatim comments that were negative. And then I just sorted them according to the content.
Sorry, hold on. Let's just kind of break it down a bit more. And I think I saw Jennifer mention that with her case, she also thinks that it's about money. Okay, so that's interesting. So, we do see multiple people thinking that the motivation is money. But with your research, you pull out reports from cases that have been proven to be alienation cases. These are people that these parents have been proven to be alienating parents because they committed more than 10 alienating behaviors.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
So for people that are not familiar with this, there's a framework that, and the initial study by Dr. Amy Baker that determines 17 alienating behaviors that are typically found in parental alienation. And so these cases, parents that have committed over 10 of those alienating behaviors. So you pick out 40 cases, and these parents, alienating parents, have been interviewed. So these are the transcript of their interviews. These are verbatim words that they use.
Yes.
Right. And then you pull out their comments, and then you're rating them according to positive and negatives. And you look at the negative comments about the other parents in order to try to see, what are they thinking about their parents? What is their motive?
At least what are they verbalizing in an interview? And I
Right,
want to say from the outset, what somebody says in an interview may be very different than what they're thinking in their head. And so
right.
this is just a beginning attempt to look at this. But then I sorted those 82 comments into what I determined to be 6 different categories: vindictiveness, fear, excessive overprotection of the child, their own psychopathology, a reenactment of their family of origin. So those kinds of things, I sorted them into those different categories. And what I found were that the 3 biggest categories were vindictiveness, fear, and excessive overprotectiveness of the child, which might be a different way of saying enmeshment. In other words, parents that portray themselves as being overly protective of the child, what it may really be reflecting is enmeshment. So those 3 categories seem to be the biggest categories in this particular sample at this particular time.
So out of these, there's these themes that emerge. There's these 6 themes that emerge, and the 3 key ones are vindictiveness, fear,
Right.
and overprotectiveness. So, could you give us an example of what you mean by vindictiveness?
Yeah, I'll read you some of these. Here's a few of them. For vindictiveness, and these are quotes. He's caused me such pain. I want to pay him back so bad. So a payback, end quotes. New quotes. He doesn't deserve to have kids love him. He's such a devil, end quote. Or she's had so many affairs. Now she thinks she can just walk away from us. Ha, end quote. So here are a couple of examples under the fear category. Quote, I can't live without my kids. I need them. He doesn't need them like I do, end quotes. Another one is quotes. What if she picks up and leaves with my kids? She could steal them. I need my kids, end quotes. For excessive overprotectiveness of the child, here's 2 examples. Quote, my daughter has asthma and her father is an idiot when it comes to watching her. She could die with him, end quotes. Another one is quotes. I want my son to be homeschooled so he won't be bullied. I need to keep an eye on him. I need to protect him because his father won't, end quotes. So those are just a few examples within those 3 major categories that I'm talking about. Just to
That
give you
was,
a feel for it, a flavor for it.
Thank you. That was interesting. So the fear is the fear of losing the children, and they don't see the children as, our children. They see it as my children,
Right,
and they are afraid of losing the children. So in order to overcome that fear, they try to take the children.
right,
So there's a
right.
lack of empathy on the
Yeah,
other side, who is also a
right.
parent, who should also be able to have the children.
Yeah, it's really coming out of a selfish preoccupation as opposed to what do the kids really need. Because we know that children need both of their parents. But these are parents that are saying, I don't want to lose my kids because I'll be alone and I can't stand to be alone. And maybe that gets back to your callers or your online person's fear of abandonment. That fear of I can't be alone, I can't survive being alone without my kids, so I've got to hold on to them as tight as I can, even if that means throwing my ex-spouse under the bus.
Right, right. I see a lot of different comments coming in. Like for example, Walter said, "So glad to see Dr. Blotcky as a guest."
Thank you.
Jennifer said, "In my case, it's about control and erasing me from my child's life. Yeah, control is a very big thing, I think." Ryan said, "When I say it's about money, it's not just regard to the parents. It's a multiple financial benefits to multiple organizations and private corporations to see this manifest as justification of their services." Okay, so
Money's
I think,
coming up a lot, isn't it? This topic
yeah,
of money is
because
coming
I
up a
think
lot.
Right, and I think what he's trying to hint to is not just the alienators, but the system
Yeah,
that enforcing,
yeah,
like, yeah, the system that enabling the
yeah,
alienation, including, lawyers are getting paid for
yeah.
cases and etc.
Well, that's
Um,
absolutely
uh,
true. That's absolutely
right.
true. That's why these cases go on for years.
Right. It's ridiculous. There are cases that are going on the whole child's life,
Right,
the whole 18 years.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Uh, there's a thing about control, and he said, how dare you divorce me? So you have to pay for this.
Right.
Well, I will ruin you. And that's what he did. And then entitlement is another thing
Mhm.
that was brought up. Uh, that uh, and then inability to incorporate with others' perspective, double down on their own righteousness,
Mhm.
even if it must be manufactured reasons. Yeah, that's all very very interesting, and I definitely felt that for my personal case, like as a child, I definitely felt that sense of entitlement, like I was a piece of property
Right.
uh, that need to be owned. And even when the alienator doesn't want the child, it's the claim of the ownership. It matters. Once the alienator has the child, doesn't mean that the alienator will care and love for the child. It's it's just the winning that matters.
Well,
And
the whole topic of using children, weaponization of the children, that's essentially right. The alienating parent is weaponizing the child against the other parent. That's certainly not in the children's best interest. None of this is about the children. This is all about the alienating parent through the children, using the children as a pawn or as a weapon or however you want to conceptualize it.
right, right. And you have decades of experience in this field. Could you talk about? I think there's a lot of topics that would be of interest to parents, and feel free. You guys feel free to put in questions. But I think some of the very important question is, for example, let's talk about diagnosis.
Okay.
You're as a clinician, as an outsider. How do you look at a case and be able to figure out that this is an alienation case versus children simply going through a period of change and, they rejecting parents because their behaviors of growing up, or versus a case of, oh, this true allegation of neglect and abuse, like how do you see this?
So we do have science about this, and so let's be clear about it. When you mentioned the 17 behavioral strategies that an alienating parent uses, so that's what I look for. I look for evidence of those 17 alienating behaviors that a parent uses, and I throw in a number 18, and the number 18 is false allegations of abuse. But so the first thing I look for is what are the 17 or 15 or 12 or 8 alienating behaviors that we can identify in one parent. But we also know that alienated children present with 8 very specific characteristics. And so I look for those. And of course, Dr. Burnett has developed what we call the 5-factor model, which essentially says that the rejected parent had an excellent relationship with the child prior to the onset of the alienation. And so that's an important dimension that's critical. So let's talk about the characteristics of what an alienated child looks like. There's a campaign of denigration by the child. There's a lack of ambivalence by the child, meaning so we know that even children who have truly been physically or sexually abused by a child still has positive feelings towards that parent. But in parental alienation, all the positive feelings are gone. And so all you get from an alienated child is negative, negative, negative. There's that lack of ambivalence. And so that's a key red flag. Lack of guilt. In other words, an alienated child treats the rejected parent like crap, but yet doesn't feel any guilt about it. So that's another characteristic of an alienated child. We know that alienated children develop what we call independent thinker phenomenon, which is where they go, yes, I'm rejecting this parent. It's all my idea. Nobody has told me anything negative about this parent. I've come to this conclusion by myself. Oh, yeah, but I forgot I'm 9 years old and I really don't think that way. So they demonstrate this independent thinker phenomenon that is real. We also know that alienated children not only reject a parent, but they reject the parent's extended family. So aunts and uncles and cousins and grandparents are all thrown out. And so there you go. Perfect. Those are the things that we look for to define who an alienated child is. So we look for the alienating behaviors. We look for the 8 characteristics of an alienated child, and we put those together, and that's how we make the diagnosis. Now, people will say, how can you do that if you don't have a chance to interview the alienating parent or the alienated child in a legal case? And that's a difficult answer, because there's the 5-factor model that's also a part of the whole equation that Dr. Burnett developed. Number 2 is the really important point, which is there was a positive prior relationship with the rejected parent. So almost never do I have an opportunity to interview the alienating parent unless I get to see him in a custody evaluation. But if just in a normal court case, the alienating parent's attorney is not going to let them meet with me, usually. And more often than not, I don't get to meet with the alienated child. Sometimes I get to, but more often than not, I don't. So that does make diagnosis more difficult. But if you have the 17 alienating behaviors and you have the 8 characteristics of the alienated child, that can go a long way to making the diagnosis pretty compelling.
Right, right. Thank you. And yeah, so it's very important for parents to be educated about this. So when you go out there, it's not a guess. It's not a there's
Right.
science behind it. There's this framework. So make sure you get yourself educated, get your team educated about this. And by your team, I mean your lawyer, your whoever is involved in your case. Make sure that they are educated about this. I do see someone mentioned about how they in and out of courts for years and they won, and yet still the alienator was able to manipulate the system, postponing cases, and then make changes. And then after so many changes, that eventually it get to a point that the guardian ad litem said, well, the child is happy with the alienator, so why don't we just leave it as that? So this is something that I remember interviewed Dr. Amy Baker, and she said, it's really strange that the system think that way, because it's like you got a robber that robbed the bank, and then after the long time of investigation, you finally found the robber, and you go, you know what? Why don't we just leave the money with the robber? Essentially,
Right.
that's what it is. It's really strange.
It's strange, but I really attribute it to a lack of education about what we're talking about. You know, guardian ad litems, I have never met one yet that had a mental health background. They don't understand parental alienation. They don't understand family dynamics. But yet a guardian ad litem is given a lot of power in these cases, and their say-so can go a long way with these judges, and yet they don't even understand what they're dealing with. So that's my frustration, is dealing with attorneys, guardians ad litem, judges, because they don't understand it. And in many cases, a mental health expert is not involved. I think a mental health expert should be involved in every case, if for no other reason to educate, and to educate.
Great. Let's talk about solution for parents. Like, let's say if you are in a situation where it's still kind of early, if you're lucky, where you start to notice these signs where the child kind of resisting, but at the same
Right.
time
It's
still kind
mild.
of right is mild. What would you advise for parents to do in where you still have contact and you still have the child and the child still sometime okay-ish? What are the things that you can do?
Well, look, I just wrote something, and this is about a case about mothers as alienating parents and fathers as targeted parents. I think one of the things you've got to do is to keep reaching out to your child. You have to keep being positive with your child. You have to spend as much time as humanly possible with your child. You have to do everything you can to make the relationship positive and solid and enduring. At the same time, if you're beginning to see signs of it, I think you have to deal with it head on. I would pick up the phone and call the other parent and say, these are some of the things I'm noticing. Let's please work together and try to head this off. In other words, try to enlist the cooperation of the mildly alienating parent to see if the two of you can work together in a way to make a difference prior to making it into a big legal battle, because that's not what you want to do. Catching it early is really important. That's one of the rules of thumb. The earlier, the better. Parental alienation can be dealt with when it's mild. It's a lot harder to deal with when it's moderate or severe. Sometimes, and I've seen this happen, if the attorney will say to the alienating parent, cut it out, it's not good for your child, it's not good for you, it's not good for your ex-spouse, please stop it. Sometimes that's enough to get her to stop. Or if the judge will say, knock it off, it's not good, stop it. Sometimes early on, that will work. I've seen it work, but then other times it doesn't work and it just develops and it gains steam and it becomes more severe. So
Right.
trying to catch it early is really, really important.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of the times I've noticed with parents is that you don't know what you're looking at
Sure.
because there's such a lack of awareness when it comes to
Right.
parental alienation that you have no idea what you're looking at. You just thought, it's strange. Why do my children behave this way? And
Right.
parents will then react to the children
Right.
without understanding the psychology
Right.
behind it and the situation behind it. So they then actually being kind of stricter to the children, reacting to the children that actually push the children away further
Right.
and make the problem
Right.
bigger. And I think
Yeah.
that's more
And then I've also seen some parents who get very passive and they just say, oh, they'll grow out of it. Oh, it's just a phase. It'll go away. It'll be okay. Well, no, a lot of times it's not going to be okay and it just gets worse. So my rule of thumb and my recommendation is to always deal with it head on. You don't have to be aggressive about it, but be firm, be loving and firm at the same time.
right. I do see Claudia says these cases are not one size fits all either. Exactly. I mean, every
That's true.
case is different. We see someone says these judges need to be educated. They oftentimes just don't get it. Yeah, that's the problem. Is we have this whole system of lack of awareness at all levels. We're talking about from the lawmakers down to judges to
Right.
anybody that dealing, even teachers,
Right.
therapists, all that. Honey asked if this interview will be available. Yes, this will be. You will have the recording stay on Facebook. It will be on YouTube. It will be in other places. So yes, you can
Yeah,
definitely.
let me say this. I gave a talk one time a couple of years ago on parental alienation, and none of the judges decided to come because they said, well, Blotky's going to be in our courtroom on various cases, and we don't want to, we don't want there to be any apparent conflict of interest or any shenanigans. And so I'm going, no, this was just going to simply be an educational seminar. That's all there was to it. So now I've realized the only way that I can educate judges is to be in their courtroom and to testify. The only way I can impact them is to testify.
Wow. Yeah, that's the other challenge too. Yes, how do you get to them?
Right.
To yeah, to change to make these changes. And then even for parents, like if parents don't get educated to recognize what they're dealing with, they won't be able to.
So let me say this to parents also. It's really, really, really important to have the right attorney. You don't have to have Perry Mason, but you have to have an attorney who understands parental alienation and who isn't passive. I had a case inquiry the other day where the guy was really interested in having me help him on the case. And I said, well, tell me about your attorney. Is your attorney, does your attorney understand parental alienation? Are y'all on the same page? Oh, yes, 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 and yes. And then I talked to the attorney, and the attorney did not have the first clue about parental alienation. Not the first clue. In fact, all he could tell me were the things that the critics say. And so at some point it became clear to me that this was not going to work out, that I wasn't going to be able to work with this attorney, because this attorney was really anti-parental alienation, not pro-parental alienation. So I'm telling you that story to say, pick the right attorney if you can. Find somebody who understands parental alienation. Ask the right questions before you hire somebody.
What are those right questions?
Tell me what your understanding is about parental alienation. How many parental alienation cases have you had? What was their outcome? Have you ever represented a rejected parent? Have you ever represented an alienating parent? Etc., etc. There's all 5 or 6 or 7 questions you can ask to get a really good feel for whether this attorney understands parental alienation.
Thank you. Thank you. One of the challenges that I face a lot is that a lot of parents would write to me and said, "Oh, do you have a recommendation for, you know, lawyer, therapist, etc. in XYZ town, in the XYZ city, in different states?" And I never have something because there's such a lack of people that actually understand this. And so people would end up going to lawyers and therapists that are wrong for them, and it's really challenging. And I always find that that's a big problem is we have this the system that don't understand it, but then we also don't have the people that can actually help these parents navigate through the system. And
Well, I will
that's
say this, and I'm not tooting my own horn, I'm just saying this as a factual matter. I can be an expert in every state in the union. And I've been to a lot of states, and I can be an expert there. But when it comes to attorneys, you're right. I mean, you can't hire an attorney in Nevada if you're in South Carolina. So you just have to ask around, but get a list of 3 or 4 different names, call them up and say, look, I want to interview you. I want to know that you and I are on the same page with the same goals. And let me ask you 5 or 6 questions and feel you out to understand where you're coming from and where I'm coming from to see if it's a good fit. And that's what I suggest people do about attorneys.
Thank you. Let's go back to the discussion about solution in, let's just for now stay in the mild cases. You talk
Okay,
about calling the alienators and say, hey, I see this issue, let's deal with it.
right.
What about with the child? Like when you see the child sort of misbehaving. So for example, I see an example in the chat room here. We see Rob said, I had a visit with my daughter. She was 7. We met this beautiful hair thing, that hair piece, and then when she got picked up by the alienator, when she get closer, she started to pull it and hide it behind her, and I could tell that this is the beginning of parental alienation.
Yeah.
That's like, how do you address something like that? Do you bring it up later? How do you talk to your child? Or sometimes it's even worse than that. The children may be even rude and cold to you. Like, let's say if you have an event at school where both the alienator is there and you are there, the child will be compelled to behave a certain way in front of the alienator. How
Right.
do you address that kind of things?
Again, I think you have to hit it head on. The trick is to do it in a firm but loving way without being overly negative to the child and without throwing the other parent under the bus in front of the child. So what I tell parents is to practice what you're going to say, rehearse it in your own mind, and have it come out in a positive, loving way, but to address the problem. Like having an honest discussion, like if my son's name is Jim, say, Jim, let's talk about it. I've noticed that when you're with me, you're one way, but when you and I are around your mother, you become a different way. You can be the same with both of us, and have an honest discussion about it. But again, I would pick up the phone and call mom and say, I've noticed that Jim is different with me than he is with you. Can we please work together to make that make that a non-issue? And do it without being negative or accusatory or trying to throw somebody under the bus. In the early stages, try to be as positive, but as you have to deal with it head on. You can't just push it under the rug and hope it gets better, because it won't. So
What
be
about
positive but firm.
Right? What about situation that I see quite a lot is where alienators will put the child in the middle. In, for example, let's say it's your time to have your children, but the
Yep.
alienator schedule an amazing, let's say, a trip to Disneyland with his best
Right,
friend,
right.
of the best cousin, the favorite uncle. And now the child felt like, well, can I go to Disneyland? And now you feel like, well, if I say no, I'm the horrible parent. If I say yes, I lose the time with the children, and this sort of thing will keep happening again and
Well,
again.
that's the thing. If it's a one-time occurrence, then you can say, fine, go to Disneyland with your friends. That'll be wonderful. If it's a repetitive pattern, then it's a problem, right? Because then you have an alienating mother or father who's trying to schedule these wonderful trips during your parenting time. And that's when you have you have to deal with it with your child and say, look, this is our special time together. It's important for us to be together. I really don't think it's a good idea for you to be going on this trip. But at the same time, you need to be calling the other parent saying, please don't schedule these wonderful trips during my parenting time. During my parenting time, I'll take my child on wonderful trips. So you have to hit it head on with the child and the parent, but do it in a positive, loving way without accusations or threats or hostilities, as long as you can.
Right, right. And I would want to add into that to parents is that whatever you do, try your best to understand what's going on here. Is that your child is actually a victim that's being bullied into this situation where the child is caught in the middle.
Right,
So instead of looking at your child as somebody that you need to punish, you need to understand that the child is a victim here so that you can handle the situation differently. Because if you don't understand that, you're
right.
going to cause even more damage to the child.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think punishing the child or being strict is the answer. I think it misses the point. And the point is what you're saying is that this is a bigger picture kind of issue, and you better approach it from a bigger picture kind of thing. Don't just punish them.
Right, right. What about situation where it's more serious? Now you don't have the children refuse to come over. Do you do you really argue with the children about choosing not to come over? And if you try to address it, how would you address it with the children or the other parents?
If they're choosing not to come over, I think again you have to hit it head on. You have to deal with the alienating parent. You have to deal with the children, and you have to say this is unacceptable. And if it doesn't change very quickly, then I think your only recourse is legal action. Because unfortunately, once parental alienation has gotten to that level, legal action is about the only thing that will work. Because when you pick up the phone and call the alienating parent and say, look, Jim is refusing to come see me now during my visits. That's really not okay. The alienating parent is going to say, well, if Jim doesn't want to go, I'm not going to make him go. Or if Jim doesn't want to go, he's made up his mind. He's a big boy. He can decide. And it's like it goes nowhere. So at that point, legal action is probably the only recourse that you have. And unfortunately, that escalates things, and it can be messy, but it may be your only recourse once it gets to that point. But I would make it clear to the child and the alienating parent that missing parenting time with me is unacceptable. It's bad for the child and it's bad for me, and it can't be tolerated. And if that means we have to go to court about the issue, then that's what we'll do.
Thank you. What about for parents that, for various reasons, no longer have, either because they lose in court or they're still going through court and the children don't come anymore, but they still have contact through maybe texting? What kind of things do you advise for parents to have to reach out to the children?
To reach out as often as you can, to express your love and concern, to tell them that you want things to be different, you wish things could be different, that you're willing to do whatever it takes to make things different, and to stick in there and to remain in there, and to have as much contact with that child as you possibly can, and to be as positive and as loving and as caring as you can possibly be.
Right. Thank you. Carolyn, I don't understand your question at all. If you wanted to clarify that, Ryan, I will touch on your question in a minute. I do see a lot more question. I'm sorry, Ron. Okay, I'm gonna clarify. Dr. Blotcky is a psychologist, so we won't be talking so much about the legal side of things. We're gonna talk about the clinical, the forensics aspect of it, because he's a clinical and forensic psychologist. Actually, talking about forensic, would you talk about false allegation?
Okay.
Yeah, how do you tell when, you know, for you personally, when you look at a case, how can you tell when an allegation is false versus true?
So one of the things that I rely on, and that I'm going to talk about at our convention next month, is the use of timelines, the putting together of timelines. Because what I have found is that false allegations of abuse are usually triggered by something that you can see on the timeline. For example, filing for divorce, filing for primary custody of a child, filing a motion to relocate away from a parent, starting a new romantic relationship. Those are the kind of events that within a few weeks you will often see a false allegation of abuse. So if you plot these out on a timeline, literally on a horizontal timeline, and you put these in bullet points, you will see the connection between an event and a false allegation of abuse. And then there are other things I look at. You know, I have many cases of false allegations of abuse, and the typical pattern is, we were married for 15 years. There was never any allegation against me for anything. I filed for divorce, and within 2 weeks, there was an allegation of abuse against me. Okay, well, it just doesn't make common sense that you have somebody who's in their 40s, who was married for 15 years, never had an allegation of anything, of any inappropriate behavior. Then within a couple of weeks for a filing for divorce, there's an allegation of abuse. That's a huge red flag that this is likely to be a false allegation. So I look at the timeline and I look at the individual's history to see. People don't just start acting inappropriately after years of being married. They just don't. That's not the way those kind of problems develop. And so I put that together, the history of the person plus the timeline, And both of those usually tell the story.
That's a very good indicator, actually. It's so true. You look at cases like you said, like 15 years on, the child is 15, and suddenly there's an allegation of child
Right,
abuse happened when
right,
the child was 2 years old, when the
right,
child was too young to be able to say anything
right.
meaningful. And you got 13 years going on. Yeah, I see this all the time.
And
That's a very
then to
good
add
point.
on to that, these parents will think, okay, I'm not getting all that much traction with one allegation of abuse. I'm going to come up with three or four more. I saw a case where the ex-wife had made 16 false allegations of abuse against her ex-husband. They had been investigated. There had been 5 or 6 investigations by Child Protective Services, all shown to be unfounded. So that just shows you the extent to which false allegations are used as weapons.
Right, right. And then parents would go in court, fight for to clear their name. The moment they got the custody back, a new allegation would come in, and
Right.
then now it put everything on hold. They can't get their children back.
I even see cases where the judge will say, okay, I'm going to give y'all 50-50. And I'm sitting here going, look, that's great. You both get to spend, virtually equal time with your child. But one parent's not happy with that. And so what do? Within a week, there's a new false allegation of abuse because they're not okay with 50-50.
Right, right. Yeah. We see this all
So
the
if you
time.
plot it out on a timeline, you will often see the triggering events.
Right. Um, so I saw a question here about more serious case. How do you deal with far more extreme cases? So I wanted to clarify with the person who asked the question that we won't be able to address the legal side of things. So he asked, how do you deal with far more extreme cases involving missing children for months, if not years, and a county and state that won't act? Now, we recently did a very big event. I think it went for 5 hours or something like that, that deal with missing children and parental abduction,
Yeah,
and we had advocates that talk about the toolkits and what you do with
right.
those cases. But on the psychology side of thing, would you talk about how do parents, I mean, the coping mechanism and anything else that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, when a child gets kidnapped essentially by a parent and disappears from the face of the earth for days, weeks, months, years, whatever, I mean, the coping mechanisms for the remaining parent are it's indescribable what the pain and anguish of what you go through with that. I mean, that's probably one of the most horrific experiences that a parent can go through. And again, I think it's a matter of staying focused and positive and taking all of the right steps that you can to try to find your child. When you said extreme examples, I was thinking the children who just flat out refuse to see a parent for days or weeks or months or years. But yeah, the ones where children are essentially kidnapped and they disappear. Wow, I mean those are the most awful cases that I can think of.
Right. We actually have someone in the chat room said that the person had 50 false allegation and
50?
50,
Wow.
and two false arrests. And I mean, we had a case that we interviewed recently where he ended up in jail for 4 months for false
Yeah,
allegation,
yeah,
and then once he cleared his name, got out of
right.
jail, and
More.
the court turned around and said, "Oh my God, we can see now there's so many false allegations. This is wrong. The mother is an alienator. We need to get the child back." The mother took the child and disappeared, and they've not been able to find the mother and the child.
Well, the case that I was describing for you a minute ago, where I had a case where there were 16 false allegations of abuse, I was in the courtroom and the judge still didn't get it. I had to essentially say to the Judge, how many false allegations does it take before we all understand that this is an intentional plan to throw this parent under the bus? And the judge was like, okay, I get it now. I get it now. Well, really? I mean, how many does it take? I
Right,
think one is enough, but
right,
certainly after two, everybody should get it. But 16 or 50, that's outrageous.
right. And the problem is once the alienator get away with one or two,
Right,
they become
right,
more emboldened, and then they just
right.
make it worse and worse and worse, and then it just
And somehow judges have become sensitized to this whole notion that, well, if parents are fighting over custody, what's a false allegation here or there? What's the big deal? That's just what parents do. Well, no, that's the wrong attitude. It's harmful, it's hurtful, and it's harmful. And judges should not become sensitized to it. I'll tell you this. If a parent would get penalized, if there would be harsh consequence for a false allegation, maybe they would stop.
exactly.
I have yet to see a parent thrown in jail. I have yet to see a parent fined. Now, sometimes parents will lose custody, so that's good. But I think some of these parents should be thrown in jail or fined to give them the message that it's not okay to lie and fabricate allegations that are harmful to everybody involved.
Right. We have the law out there that said if you lie under oath,
Right,
it is a
right,
criminal
right,
conduct,
right,
but it's never enforced, especially in the family court. People just accept that, oh, it's just words, and then if the other person can't defend themselves, that's their problem. Let's just see, who has the loudest mouth,
right.
essentially, unfortunately. What about situation where now we have all these court situation, and then the children grow out of the system, the children now adult?
Yeah.
What advice do you have for parents in trying to reconnect with these children?
Keep trying, keep reaching out, keep showing them that you're interested. I have a case right now where this mom has some grown children who are still severely alienated from her. And it keep reaching out, keep reaching out, keep reaching out. You've got to keep trying.
What about talking to the children? Like parents often, because the children are being told these false allegation and these false, and
Yeah, yeah,
they're given false memory
right.
about that. Like, how much do parents, like, how should parents actually
Well, I think
confront the
with
children
adult
about?
children, I think you should try to correct the record. Tell them the truth. They're not little kids anymore. They don't need to be protected from the courts. They're grown adults now. And I think it's certainly appropriate to spend time correcting their understanding of what went down. Because you're right, a lot of these adults now have some very misinformed understandings of what went down. And I think the rejected or targeted parent, the one who's alienated, can certainly try to correct the record by having some frank conversations with the children.
So the thing is, it's difficult though, right? Because
Yeah.
when changing someone that has been brainwashed with one-sided story, how do we approach that without triggering
Well, look,
reaction?
I think you have to try any way you can. I think you could do that. You can try to correct the record, or you can say, "Look, I love you. I want to reconnect with you. I've made mistakes. Let's get past it. Let's start now and move on." So that might be a better strategy with some adult children. I think you have to use whatever strategy you think might work with your child given the context of what went down.
Right, right,
And sometimes giving them information is helpful, sometimes just appealing to them emotionally
right.
and just showing them that you care and that you want to be connected with them. You don't want to badmouth anybody. You don't want to throw anybody under the bus. You just want to have a relationship, however it can be.
Right. What about the question here from Nancy? Would you recommend reunification therapy or family therapy for all members?
So here's my this is my dog and pony show, because this is my pet peeve, and this is what judges don't seem to understand. So I'm going to use this opportunity to say it. Reunification therapy is fantastic as long as the alienating parent has stopped his or her behavior. Because here's what happens. Judges will order reunification therapy to go on, but won't do a thing about the alienating parent. And so reunification therapy will start, and guess what happens? It gets undermined, it gets sabotaged, because the alienating behavior of the parent is still operative. And so then people will go, well, why is this reunification therapy failing? Maybe this rejected parent is a bad parent. No, it's failing because the alienating parent is still doing his or her behavior. So my answer to your question is reunification therapy is great as long as the alienation has stopped. If it hasn't stopped, reunification therapy is going to get sabotaged and sidetracked.
Right. Could you clarify more? And I know we've run out of time, so I guess this will be the last question is, like, could you tell us what is in the reunification therapy? What's entailed?
So reunification therapy is between the alienated child and the rejected parent, just those two, with the idea of focusing on repairing, restoring, strengthening their relationship. And my experience with that is that that works great, and it can work pretty fast as long as the alienation has stopped. That's the key. The alienation has to stop. And if it hasn't stopped, then that makes the reunification harder. Much
Right.
harder.
Right. It's sometimes impossible.
Sometimes impossible.
Right.
Not because the reunification won't work, it's because the alienation is still getting in the way.
Right. Thank you so much for your time. And I know there's more question in the chat room. I will send you the link to this video so that you can see other questions. And parents, feel free to put more comments that if we can address it later, we will.
Can I give you my email address?
I have your email address.
Okay.
Oh, if you want to give it in the public?
Yeah.
Please, feel free. Yes, it's up to you.
So you can reach out to me at Alan Blotky, AlanBlotcky, at att.net.
Thank you. There you go. Parents, you guys can definitely reach out to Dr. Blotky directly. Do you have any last words to parents before we go?
Yeah, my last, these conversations always seem negative and down, and they are, because they're serious topics. But I do want to say that parental alienation can be treated, it can be prevented. It just takes the right situation with the right people involved, everybody going in the same direction on the same page. And so I just want to leave with a sense of optimism that things can get better.
Yeah, definitely. Never give up hope.
Never
Parents,
give up hope.
Yeah, if you could please help us share this video and like this video, that way more people can see this. And we will get back to you guys again soon. We have some events scheduled already. If you guys look into our program, you'll see coming up soon, we have an event where we'll talk about the quality of life and physical and psychological health of adult children. This is the research that was done in Germany. We have another study that talk about the process of indoctrination and brainwashing that happened to the to the children in parental alienation, that process that the alienators use. So definitely look out for that and join our mailing list on our website, victimtohero.com. Dr. Blotky, thank you so much. Really
I appreciate it. And stay in touch and send me all that information.